Good morning. On today, this post Yom Kippur day, hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful Yom Kippur. And we now, after that inspiration, elevation, and connection that we all experienced on Yom Kippur, we move on to the holiday of joys, Man Simchatenu, the holiday of Sukkot. So first, let me put in some tzedakah, a little charity, so that we bring forth blessings of Hashem. And today, there's no in particular subject. Today is just in general. Let's talk a little bit about Sukkot. I'll try to touch upon some of the basics and maybe a little beyond. And if you have a question, you're welcome to send here in the comments, and hopefully I'll notice and I'll try to address if I can. But let's start with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyah bidvaro. So, Sukkot 101. In the Torah it says that on the holiday of Sukkot, you should be joyous. Now, every one of the three pilgrimage holidays, which is Passover, Shavuot, when God gave us the Torah, Sukkot, when we sit in the huts, we sit in the sukkah, is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to be joyous. Sukkot, in addition, is referred to as Man Simchatenu. The Torah, again, particularly specifies with regards to the holiday of Sukkot to be joyous. And where does the joy come from? Where does the joy come from? So, various reasons. But beginning with, as we're today in post Yom Kippur, we know with certainty that after Rosh Hashanah and after Yom Kippur, and we have done teshuvah, we have repented that our slate is wiped clean. And the next 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, it says we're so busy with mitzvahs, we're busy with the sukkah, we're busy with making sure that we have the lulav and the etrog and the hadassim, that there's no time to engage in negative, sinful behavior. So, as the famous Kotzker Rebbe, I believe, said, that I want my chassidim to be, my followers, not to focus so much on not sinning, but they should be so busy with doing mitzvahs, with doing good, that they have no time to sin. So this period now between Yom Kippur and Sukkot sort of embodies that. So when Sukkot comes, we're joyous. We just had Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, forgiveness, started a new slate. God has forgiven us. God knows that we are human beings. We are fallible. We have shortcomings. We make mistakes and so on. As long as Hashem tells us, you do tshuva sincerely, we start all over again. So that is part of this Man Simchatenu. God says our joy of the unity of the Jews amongst themselves, the unity of God with us, and so on. So this is all part of the joy of Chag HaSukkot. Now, I want to explain some of the basics of Sukkot, because sometimes we might focus on some of the deeper meanings, which is all wonderful and fine, but we forget about the meat and potatoes. I want to discuss a little bit of the meat and potatoes, because every year I get questions about building a sukkah, the kosher part of the sukkah. So maybe just not to get too tedious, if you have more questions, you're welcome to reach out to text, but to give some of the basics of what constitutes a kosher sukkah. For those who build a sukkah every year, hopefully you know this already. For those who are this year saying, okay, this is my growth for the year, this is my hachlata, this is my resolution to bring the mitzvah of sukkah to myself, to my children, to my family. Sukkah in general represents unity, and that's an important thing now, especially after October 7th, October 8th, or more correctly, Simchat Torah, which is the real anniversary of the massacre in Israel. But as many of us rabbis have focused in the sermons and discussions on Simchat Torah, is that our focus is on the day after and the tremendous unity that it has brought to us throughout the world. So Sukkot is a holiday of unity because it's the only mitzvah that you could fulfill together with someone else with the same mitzvah. Meaning, if you're putting on tefillin while you're putting on tefillin, someone else can. They have to wait till you finish. But Sukkah, we could all go in, and the Talmud even uses the expression, Uyim Kol Yisrael, the entire Jewish people can fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah together. If technically you have a Sukkah that is huge, which I think the record for the largest sukkah in the United States, at least, is the sukkah in Crown Heights, which takes up an entire street, President Street. For those who know Brooklyn, is a huge sukkah for the guests that come from Israel. So Sukkah is the holiday of unity. But let's talk about some of the basics. And I say this so that if you haven't done Sukkah, it's a wonderful mitzvah to take on and experience with your family, because it has such beauty, and it has much symbolism in that mitzvah. So, but to discuss some of the, put this on Do Not Disturb. So, discuss some of the basics of the mitzvah, what constitutes a kosher sukkah. Now, the main kosher part of the sukkah is the schach, is the covering. The walls, as long as they're sturdy, can technically be made of anything. Again, as long as they're sturdy. Now, of course, there's discussion and there's details, and there could be questions of what's a kosher wall, but for the most part, to keep it simple, basic for this class of it, if the walls are sturdy, they're not flimsy and so on, the walls of any sukkah are kosher. Now, you have to put up the walls first and then the schach. You can't put the schach and then put the walls. That's a non-kosher sukkah. Now, if for whatever reason you already have the schach and you're just adding the walls, then you would have to remove some of the schach. And again, it gets a little technical, so we'll keep it simple. Okay? Now, for schach to be kosher, it must be disconnected from its roots, meaning schach has to be something that grows from the ground. And it has to be something that's raw rather than made. In other words, you can't take a piece of plywood and put it as a cover. It has to be sort of raw, branches or similar, and it cannot be connected to its source. So let's say you and if something is connected to its source and it's above the schach, it renders the schach not kosher. This is very practical here in Florida or many other places, that you cannot build your sukkah under a porch. You cannot build your sukkah under a tree that has branches coming over the sukkah. Also, in order for the sukkah to be kosher, the schach, you have to have enough schach on top of the sukkah that protects the sukkah from the sun, meaning you have to have more shade than sun. Another basic law of the sukkah is that the schach cannot be nailed down to the sukkah. Okay, so these, I think, are some of the basics. Other than that, there's always details. There's also a certain size that the sukkah needs to be. It can't be too small. But these are some of the basics, so that you have the review of of what are the basics of a sukkah. If you need more details, of course, reach out and we will try to guide you and help you and so on. Now, the other mitzvah of the holiday, talk about Sukkot 101, is the biblical command to take the 4 species. The 4 species is, of course, the lulav, which is the tallest of the palm tree, the palm branch, and you have the etrog, which has, again, intricate laws to make sure, because only with the etrog, and then we extend it to the others, only with the etrog does the Torah say that it should be a beautiful fruit, pre-Eitz Hadar. So it has to be a beautiful fruit. And then we have the hadassim, we have the myrtles, and we have the willow branch. So these are the 4 species, as we've discussed in the past plenty of times. Each one of these represent different things, but they also each one in their own way represent unity. We take them all together, and there's beautiful messages related to that. That's all part of discussions, and you could look up the classes from the past on YouTube, and you could see more details on these discussions. This is just going over some of the basics. Now, if you do not have your own lulav and etrog, you could stop by here at Chabad. We'll be glad to help you and assist you. And again, it's a biblical command to take the lulav and etrog and make a bracha, make a blessing. I will share a quick sort of lulav etrog story. Most likely I've shared this story in the past, but I'll share it again. Avus nicht. So, as you might know, I'm sure you've seen pictures. videos of how careful because this is the only mitzvah that the Torah explicitly says it should be beautiful, and more specifically with the etrog. So we're very meticulous to take a beautiful esrog, depending on what you could afford. A top class esrog probably fetches $1,000. You could get an esrog for $10. You can get an esrog for $1,000, and that depends on its shape, its cleanliness, its bumps. So these are part, and its whole completeness. Meaning, average fruit, you look at it, usually has some piercings. There's some holes. A perfect esrog is not easy to come by. And a perfect esrog, perfect size, perfect shape, and etc., is quite expensive. And throughout history, we have gone ahead and we've spent the money. There's different things you spend money. You spend money on a nice car. You spend money on a nice vacation. And here, because of our love for the mitzvah, we have over the years spent big money on an esrog, for those, again, who could afford. So there's a story told. It's one of my favorite Sukkot stories of a Jew, of a fellow, of a fine man who, although he was not wealthy, but this was the mitzvah he took on. The Talmud talks about taking on your special mitzvah. Avuch b'may hava zahir tvei. Even though we should love and be dedicated to every mitzvah, nevertheless, the Talmud discusses, and throughout history, that's been the case, that there were people who said, okay, this will be my special mitzvah, where I go the extra mile. This fine individual, we'll call him Yankel. We'll give him a name, Yankel. So this Yankel, although he was not wealthy, but he took upon himself this mitzvah of having a beautiful esrog, to the extent that all year, he would have a little sort of savings box, a piggy bank, and he would put extra money, change, and so on into this box for the express purpose of fulfilling this beautiful mitzvah of esrog in the best way that he can. And he wouldn't spare any expense for that perfect esrog. One year, he goes to the marketplace a few days before Sukkot with great excitement. That means that he lived with this mitzvah of etrog all year round. Usually we live with it already, maybe from after Yom Kippur or after Rosh Hashanah. This year, I think it was right after Rosh Hashanah that I got a call from the esrog dealer. Oh, your esrog is here. Okay, wonderful, fine. But this year, this Yankel of ours loved this mitzvah, and the entire year he lived with this mitzvah. He had extra change. What do you save up for your vacation? What do you save up for? Save up for a nice suit. He saved up for an esrog. That was his love for the mitzvah, for God Almighty, and so on. Okay, finally, it arrives the day he goes to the marketplace to buy this esrog, and he's really excited. He comes to the marketplace, and he has 300 ruble, large sum of money. And as he's about to go to the different stands selling their esrogs or etrog, he sees a fellow sitting there on the side and is crying. And Rabbi Yankel, having a beautiful heart, says to this fellow, he says to him, "Why are you crying? Was weinst du? Why are you crying?" He didn't want to answer him. He says, "I'm crying. There's not much you could do." Well, he knew Yankel was not from the... Yankel was an ordinary fellow. He didn't feel that he wants to share his troubles. "I'm crying. Don't worry, you good. Thank you for asking." But Yankel didn't move on. He says, "No, tell me why you're crying. Who knows? Maybe I can help. Tell me why you're crying." Finally, after much nudging and begging, the fellow says to Yankel the following. He says, "Look, I'm a balagola. I'm a wagon driver. I'm a coachman." This was a business then, of course, right? 4 cars. And that's my whole livelihood for my family. And I brought people here to the marketplace, and my horse or horses which is my whole business, to how I feed my family and keep them warm during the winter, etc., died. It died. And I just don't have the means. I live from hand to mouth. I do not have the means to buy a new horse, and I'm devastated. But thank you for listening. I know that you're not the one that, it's not your problem, it's my problem. So Yankel says to the fellow, he says, tell me, how much does a good, new, healthy horse that you need, or horses, how much do you need? So he told him, it's a large sum of money. He says, tell me, how much do you need? He says, I need 300 ruble. Yankel said to the fellow, without hesitation, he said to him, here is 300 ruble, and buy yourself a horse so that you could enter into the holiday with joy and with good spirit and so on. He says, are you kidding me? He says, well, look, I know you're not a man of those kind of means. He says, just accept it. It's my greatest pleasure and honor. Just take it. And he gave him the 300 ruble. That entire year he saved up for the etrog. And he bought a $10 etrog for himself. And on that Sukkot, Yankel, back in his hometown, went around with great joy, with great simcha. And he said to everybody, whoever asked him, who were accustomed, people sometimes on Sukkot, you know how it is, there's some competitiveness and so on. People say, let me see your etrog, mine is nice. It happens, human beings, human nature. And everybody always expected that Yankel had the nicest etrog. They saw it was a very simple, ordinary etrog. And Yankel responded to them the following. He says, every year I make the blessing on the lulav, an etrog on an etrog, and a beautiful etrog. This year, I joyfully and thankfully I'm making my blessing on a horse. And this story is in line with what we shared, our short message before Yom Kippur. For those of you who heard that the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Hasidic movement, on Kol Nidre night, sensed that there was a woman who just gave birth and needed help, and he left the synagogue and went to help her. This sums it up. The two ends that is expected from us. To show up for Kol Nidre, to show up and make sure that we nurture and connect our holiness, spirituality with mitzvahs and prayer, and at the same time to be sensitive and to be truly dedicated to helping another person in need. Both together is what a wholesome person is in their connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God. So, with that in mind, Sukkot is that as well. Sukkot is when we thank God. The basic reason we sit in a sukkah says in the Torah, because God says, when I took you out of Egypt, I put you into a sukkah and protected you. And there are two opinions in the Talmud, whether it means physical Sukkot or it means the clouds of glory that the Torah talks about that protected us. So on the one hand, it's a thanking and appreciating what Hashem has done for us. On the other hand, or not on the other hand, but together, I forgot the fancy word for that, congruently, I think it is. Sukkot, the Rambam says, Maimonides says, any holiday, and especially Sukkot, to sit in the sukkah only by yourself and just to give them sort of the street translation of what he says, just to sort of stuff your face with delicious food on Sukkot, that, says the Rambam, is not the true joy of the holiday. That's just the joy of your kreisoi, of your stomach. True joy is when you invite others to come and experience, especially those who are in need. So these are the two parts of the sukkah. These are the two parts of the holiday. These are the two parts of our relationship with God. Kol Nidre, sense that there's a Jewish woman who just gave birth. Any human being, a human being in need. So may we experience the beauty of this upcoming holiday. There's a lot more that can be discussed because it's kind of hectic and there's a lot to do over here. My time is a little bit limited, but any questions you're welcome to send if you have further questions. But I give you a blessing, give all of us a blessing, that the holiday of Sukkot, which also the four species represents, thanking God for the produce, for our food, for the abundance, that He will bless us all. May it be so. May you have a wonderful Sukkot, a joyous Sukkot, you, your family, your community, and all of Klal Yisrael, Am Yisrael. I just saw a picture of the first Sukkah in Gaza, in Azaf, for already in 20 years. May we may we have true, genuine peace in the entire world. Good people all over should be victorious. The people who are lost and confused should be enlightened, should come back to who they really are, their source, so that we have a world filled with goodness and kindness and blessing. Everybody have a good Yom Tov. Thank you.